Okay, everyone, hi. First of all, thank you so much to Lisa, Ray, and Jason, wherever you are, for having us today, and thank you for coming in. Of course, as Lisa said, the important people are in the room. My name is Beatriz Datangel Rodgers. I lead marketing here at Root. I'm joined by
Hey, I'm John Amaral, CTO, co-founder of Root. Thanks for staying. It's good to see you all.
Today, we're going to answer a deceptive, or somewhat deceptive question. How secure is your base image? And the plan is to show you what's inside 3 popular open source containers that we see in the wild all the time. And to do so, we're just going to do a little bit more than just counting CVEs. I think that's really what people are seeing now. We always hear of we got to get to zero vuln. But really, what does that look like in security is thinking about action in open source, software development. And this presentation will help provide ways to help reduce CVEs out there in the wild or what you're working on a day-to-day basis. All right, and so let's start off with just why this matters. Exploits now arrive in hours and defenders still take weeks. There's a process lag that really you start wondering, why is this still happening? We use AI and we get answers using Perplexity all the time. We get code that almost is visualized with Claude Code in seconds. But yet CVEs, once they're discovered, there's a lot of back and forth. Once they're discovered, there's a test, there's approval, and then there's just ultimately bureaucracy that slows us down. And one thing that actually showed up 2 weeks ago, so it's actually really timely for this talk, was a Git vulnerability, CVE, lots of numbers, 2025, 48384. But really, that doesn't matter. What happens with the real process is what matters. John, you want to take it away and show us more what happened with that KEV?
Yeah, so for those of you who may not be familiar with the idea of a CISA KEV, CISA is the government agency that cares about security. This is a vulnerability that has 3 parts. One is that it has a name CVE. It's known to be exploitable in the wild, and there is a fix or a workaround for it. That vulnerability 48384 came up recently, and it's one of these Linux package vulnerabilities. It's in Git, the Git packages. It's been proven to be easy to own, basically, and the government's saying you should patch it. Basically, patch it as fast as you can, or else there'll be penalties, which is kind of cool. At least it's driving action, which I think is always positive. But with this particular one, the timeline's really interesting. It came out in July. Within like 4 days, a proof of concept was made for it, and then an exploit kit came out 15 days later. But that was about 18 days before any of the major Linux distros had come up with a patch, and Debian decided to not patch it at all. And so if you're on Debian, which is the most popular container base image by count of images on Docker Hub, at least for latest, and by count of those out running in the wild, you probably have that vulnerability, and it's not a great one. So we were called to action on that. We published a blog post, but that's one that we worry about, and certainly the federal government worries about a lot.
Yeah, and so when we start thinking about just how secure your base image is, that's what we're building containers off of, and now we start thinking, well, what about some popular base images? How does that look like? How secure are those, John?
Yeah, in our day job at Root, we see a lot of container images because we build a software platform that helps people secure those. So we see thousands and thousands, and they run through our system. And I took a sample of, say, what are the 3 of the most popular ones that we see today that are problematic? And that intersection is pretty big. We see a lot of problematic ones. And what we find today is people are using popular containers. They're taking latest on whatever they have. We picked 3 of those, and latest isn't always secure. I say that container images age like milk, not like wine. They get worse over time. CVEs keep coming. There's an accumulation factor because more and more things get disclosed and more CVEs get found. And the enterprise reality is that I've been in the business of helping folks secure containers maybe for I don't know, as long as containers have existed, 15 years or whatever that is. And we see the same patterns happening over and over and over again. There's been a lot of talks. I've done several talks about what can you do about images. But when I go look at the facts coming off of our system and out of trends we see, the same patterns keep emerging. So we're going to talk about 3 of those containers where the patterns emerge. I'm going to show you what they look like, and we can see what what's going on and how you might be able to fix them. And to me, I think container images are the edge of infrastructure for folks who work with Kubernetes and are building infrastructure. Those are the workloads you use, and that's the embodiment of open source software. So these three are pretty common. One is Golang, and all these images are on Debian. So we're going to be showing you a Golang image, talking about how it's built, what some of the choices were, and how that image was built, and why, and how it's not great. Another one is Python 3.10, and these are all, again, on Bookworm Debian. And then some of the problems with that, and how both those images have really high CVE counts in the thousands. And it's a situation we see all the time. And then what talk today is good without having some sort of AI. And I'm seeing a lot of MCP servers and MCP server gateways coming up into the population. So we'll talk about some things there where that's a bit of an outlier compared to the other two that have some pretty similar patterns. And the goal today is to show you how, what we did to scan them, what the observations were from a CVE lens, and then what the observations were by looking at the Docker files and understanding exactly how those are built, why they're built that way, and what you can do to make them built better. And but first line analysis like this is really a great starting point for anyone who cares to weave security into the software that they're building. So the first image, Golang, and these commands you see up here are the ones that you could copy and use on the same images. And two of them are just to pull it and scan it. And the third is to extract some of the basic facts, these JQ queries, that will allow you to see kind of through the lens that I had with this. The first one goes back to what Beatriz was saying earlier, which is this git CVE is one of these. And this has 115 vulnerabilities, 3 criticals, 148 highs, and 687 Linux headers. Anybody here have to deal with compliance reporting for security and images and such? We all do, right? Why not? Those are big numbers that make people's eyes raise, especially if your customers care about your security or compliance is important to your business. We spend a lot of time fixing vulnerabilities like that, and I'll show you in this one that those vulnerabilities are actually quite easy to fix if you just had a good Docker file. The one that's really troubling here is this sysakev, as I mentioned earlier. You have about 30 days to fix that, give or take. But there is enforcement, especially if you sell to the federal government, and they could do stuff to your FedRAMP status and all that. But this image, particularly Golang, we like Go because it's self-contained, compiled binary code, and usually you can make pretty secure images from that. But in this case, what this image really is a development image. It has a sort of pretty much full functioning Debian bookworm with compile headers, Git capabilities. It's meant for a developer to do work with and to build from, right? It's not meant to go to production, even though this is a sample we saw in production. And really, the compliance gap on this one, especially these 687 vulnerabilities, I'll talk more about it in the next frame, in the next container. These are all just literally part of libcdev, which is just a shim on top of the kernel, which doesn't ship with containers. So we can fix those easily with some better builds. These are excerpts from the Docker file. So looking up here, first, the way this image is built, it's built from a build pack that's obviously top line, meant for building images. And it has a bunch of tool chain baggage. So you see G++, GCC, libc6. These are dev tools that are embedded into the lower layers of this that really make this image bloated and full of vulnerabilities. And these are some of the things you can do. I'll show you a multi-stage build example later where we can just get that stuff out of there. Just pretty straightforward. It's also, by omission, not secure because it runs as root. Not my root, the other root. But if it was running as my root, it'd be great. But that's true, and it really should have a different user space. And then this little Go path here with world or writable permissions in that chmod, this means basically if an attacker can drop a binary in that Go path, then pretty much they have the ability to do anything with that. So the key takeaway here, this is a dev image disguised as a production image, poorly disguised, full of vulnerabilities, and a bunch of these, I'll call it Docker file no-nos that make it just a really not secure and not compliance-friendly image. The next one is Python 3.10, and Python's becoming ever more popular with AI tooling, et cetera. Pulled it, scanned it, looked for a bunch of results. Again, another crazy high total of vulnerabilities, 254 criticals and highs, and the header vulnerabilities we talked about. The problem with a bunch of Debian vulnerabilities is something called DFA, which is Debian chooses to often defer vulnerabilities, fixes to later versions of their operating system. So I mean, say you're on Bookworm today. Trixie is coming out. They'll often say, I'm not going to fix in Bookworm. I'm just going to push the fixes to Trixie. Right. And that causes you in this gap where there's really no solution for you. Of course, you could go to a different operating system, but that's super inconvenient and hard sometimes. Whereas Ubuntu and Red Hat will come out with fixes right away, Debian will wait. It's a choice, and they make that choice based on their belief about the criticality. The problem is if you're on Debian and your compliance says you have to have no vulnerabilities, then you're stuck. And it's not a great place to be stuck. This libc vulnerability I point to here, libc dev, again, a dev-tooled image. Raw numbers look terrible. It has the DFA problem with Debian, and it also, those vulnerabilities are not real. And, but for compliance reasons, it's hard to ignore them. Looking again at the Docker file, we're building again from this build pack base, which is another basically full builder, and adding a bunch of other kinds of Bluetooth dev tools, et cetera, dev headers staying in the final image. And it's got one more of these kind of insidious little problems with the way it uses GPG to receive keys to unpack probably some dependencies it has. And for that, you see this -- receive keys? That pretty means it's tofu. It's basically you accept whatever key it gives you with no independent validation of that key. It's really a bad practice. You should use something else like vendor in the keys or something like that, or use WKD. But basically, you've got another one of these builder patterns. And again, another image we observed in production in one of our observations. And you've got a bunch of these kind of structural issues, including this problem with having dev headers again. Easy things to identify with some quick evaluation of the Docker file, coupling the Docker file analysis with CVEs, looking at what's patchable. You'll see in some of the remediation suggestions we have. And the third and final container of the population that we've looked at is this MCP gateway container, which is kind of a cool piece of software. It lets you build granular authentication proxy at different MCP servers, so it kind of sits in front of a farm of MCP servers. It looks pretty clean, right? Five CVEs, not too bad. But 3 of the 5, 2 highs and 1 medium, are actually quite bad. It's one of these ones where the vulnerabilities actually matter. One of them, 47907, allows buffer bleed across under certain circumstances, which means content from one process can bleed into the other. The Docker client GSA has a problem where firewall D, when it comes up and down, it can actually expose it drops firewall rules where ports can actually be exposed externally. And then this map structure leak, it actually leaks tokens and possibly secrets into log files. These are all really bad, right? But you might be lulled into complacency by seeing so few vulnerabilities. And this is where the scrutiny of the vulnerabilities against the packages and the real-world examples, that introspection works really good. This one also has some interesting Docker file capabilities. I'll point out the fact that, if you look at the numbers, right, from a compliance perspective, the first two will give you headaches because you've got a lot of work to do to get rid of them, and Docker file structural changes. And I would change the Docker file on all these. But the last one is actually the most insecure. And you wouldn't think so by just looking at the CVE number. So there's a lot more under the hood here that you need to kind of get the muscle memory to go off and figure out. And I can evaluate these sorts of things in a matter of half an hour. I think anybody can learn to do that. But just looking for some of these patterns, and these patterns occur over and over again. Again, this few excerpts from the Docker file pulled from scratch with this little din, D-I-N-D at the end there. That means Docker in Docker. Anybody know what Docker in Docker is? It's when you put Docker in a container to run to run in Docker, right? Not a great pattern. There's sidecar patterns you could use that are a little more secure than that, and you can go look those up easily. I think ChatGPT would even recommend a better version of this Docker file for you. And then in that nesting, then there's a bunch of interesting tools here. You've got Docker CLI, of course, because you need to run the Docker CLI to get things done with the Docker in Docker setup. So that gives you a bunch of, like, if you're an attacker and you gain access to this, you have a bunch of things you can do. And it's got SOCAT too, which is like it's like Netcat on steroids. It gives you the ability to open ports between any inter-process communications. That if forward ports build tunnels. So here you have another container, again, kind of small in size, has a bunch of these, certainly small in vulnerability size, has a bunch of these kind of staging capabilities, and it's built on this kind of interesting pattern. We can remediate all of this, and most of it can be remediated by a combination of, I'll tell you, we can get rid of almost all of this by just building better Docker files. So for each of these, I've put some suggestions on what you can do. For Golang and for Python, pretty simple. If we use the multi-stage build there, you could have the best of both worlds. You could have a builder container that allows you to do all the things you need to do to be able to construct software and build the application you need. And then you can inherit from that builder the parts that you need to build a runtime. So that's an easy fix and something you can do quite easily by building a multi-stage refactoring of this. For the MCP server, we would have to attack those three vulnerabilities independently, and for the sysakev as well. So for the sysakev, if you're on Debian, what you're going to need is to either figure out you don't need the GitLab library, or you're going to need to backport a patch for that, and they're available. There are places you can go for that, but that's easy. If you don't need the Git toolchain in your production, take it out. If you need it, you need to patch it, because I think it's actually a bad vulnerability. And then for MCP, the vulnerabilities can be fixed by one of three ways. One, bump the toolchain for Go, and that will get rid of that Go bleed over vulnerability. You can bump the Docker client up to 28.3.3, and that will give you the ability to avoid that firewall issue. And then you can also update map structure. But there are updates available for that, and they can be fixed easily. And then I would refactor the Docker in Docker to use a sidecar capability so that you can avoid that pattern altogether. The immediate goal here is to just build better from the start on these structural issues, and then find ways to patch and exclude things. But the playbook here is obvious. You handle the worst vulnerabilities. You go straight to those and make sure that they are working properly. You strip away all the dev tools, use a multi-stage build, and find patterns that work better. The architectural and structural changes here are pretty straightforward. You see this from the original single-stage build. You just move to a multi-stage build, which is this copy from builder user local go. That takes the output of the build on one side and moves it into the runtime. Significant security benefits, eliminates unnecessary tools. You get the benefit of much less vulnerabilities with this compliance thing, and you get real security from the structural benefits and operational benefits. Beatriz,
we have one quick product mention. We're talking about CVEs a lot. There's a lot of numbers up there. Sometimes you just want to, there's a lot of scanners out there that will say, we'll help you prioritize just what John showed. Here's, based on what we're seeing, this is what you need to do first. And sometimes it's going beyond detection. You just want to fix it now. Some things that we could do here is we don't just scan it, we help you plan the remediation with agents. We then give you surgical fixes so you don't have to rebase, or you don't have to do another upgrade and possibly even migrate around, a different OS to get there. But then what the magic is really beyond that, seeing this all happen in minutes. What you see here, those numbers kind of vanish using root or using any other tool that you can try to find. There are many tools out there. The difference is usually trying to get off of Debian or Ubuntu and going into another OS. What we find is stick with what you have. You go get all the information you need, be it SBOMs, VEC statements, what have you, to help you get audit audit ready, but still get the developer experience you need to get there. That's it, I swear. That's all it is. You can learn more. You can connect with us on LinkedIn to learn more and chat more. I think we still have some time for questions. We wanted to make sure there was a little bit more of a discussion around, if possible. If not, we'll save room for the next speaker.